Hey, hey, hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. Some people take a personal day to rest. Others take one to spend the night at Mike's house and forget they're married. Today on rSpace, this cheater forgot she had a husband. He reminded her with a lawyer. Wife disappeared for a day with her lover and said it was a break. I disappeared too and came back with divorce papers. Throwaway account because I have family members who use Reddit. Names are changed for the same reason, and I won't be adding much identifying information. My wife, Jenna, 26 female, and I, 27 male, were happily married for close to 2 years before everything went wrong. I didn't notice any problems or signs of infidelity, and I always watched closely. It's not like I didn't trust her, but I just paid attention to her. She wasn't distant, and she wasn't spending a lot of time on her phone. Then everything changed about a week ago. Suddenly, she seemed preoccupied. When we were together, she'd sometimes seem to forget that we were talking and drifted off into thought. It seemed silly at first, like she was daydreaming about something. I didn't take it too seriously. Then came the disappearance. 3 days ago, she just didn't come home from work. At first, I thought she just had a bit of extra work to do. I texted her and asked her what time she would be home. No response. I sent her 2 more messages after that and got no answer. I wasn't worried yet, but I thought it was unusual. She didn't like texting much, but she made an exception for me and usually got back to me quickly. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up the phone. When the same thing happened 2 more times, I started to worry. This really wasn't like her. My mind went for the worst. Had something happened to her? We live in a pretty safe city, but anything could have happened. She could have been mugged, or she could have gotten into an accident. I started getting ready to drive down to her office, but I checked my phone first to see if I still had her coworker, Lily's, phone number. I'd had to call her when we hosted a dinner for some of her team members a few months back. Luckily, I still had it saved. I gave her a call and she picked it up almost immediately. She sounded a little confused about getting a call from me, and she was even more confused when I asked if Jenna was still at work. She said Jenna had left work on time the day before. The day before? I told Lily that I was asking about today. She sounded even more confused when she told me that Jenna hadn't come into work. I asked if she was sure, and she said she was. She told me Jenna had called in sick and the team had covered some of her tasks for the day, so she definitely wasn't mistaken about that. Lily asked if everything was okay, because it was clear that something was off if I didn't know those basic facts about my wife. I said I wasn't sure yet, and that I'd let her know. I didn't know what to think. My first thought was that something could have happened to her in the morning, but that wasn't possible. She'd texted me in the afternoon, telling me what she'd had for lunch, and Lily said she'd called in sick. Jenna wasn't missing or in danger. She'd disappeared somewhere. Only God knows where. She hadn't felt it was noteworthy enough to let me know that she was going to be skipping work either. Now I had a fresh set of worries. Had she run out on the marriage? I remembered how weird she'd been acting over the past few days, and I started beating myself up for not taking it more seriously. It felt like the only plausible explanation to me. She was tired of the relationship and she'd stepped out. It sounds unlikely now, but it really is something that happens. It's not always a dramatic exit. Sometimes spouses just slip out quietly, leaving their partner to go crazy with worry, which was what was happening to me in that evening. I thought about calling her parents to find out if she was with them, but I didn't want to cause a panic. I didn't want to set off an alarm before I was sure that this was something serious. So I waited. By the time midnight rolled around, I was considering calling the police. I was pretty sure nothing had happened to her, based on what I'd put together from Lily's account, but I was getting paranoid. This was unlike her, and I didn't want to just sit around and do nothing. Eventually, around 2 a.m, I heard her key in the front door. She walked in and froze for a moment, and then just said, "Hey," like nothing was going on. I remarked that she was home late. I started off slowly to gauge her reaction. I knew I wasn't going to get the truth out of her, so I needed to be smart about it. She just shrugged and said she had a long day and that she was sorry about that. She was doing her best to act casual, but there was something off about her movements. She seemed nervous or self-conscious, like she could tell I was watching her like a hawk. She turned her back to me and made herself busy with something at the counter. I could tell she was just hiding her face. I asked her where she'd been and why she came home so late. She was silent for a while before she said she needed a break after work and she'd gone out with some friends. She said I could call them to confirm. I didn't bother. I had a feeling they'd been told to back up her lame story. Instead, I told her that I'd already made a call earlier. I told her that I'd spoken to Lily, and I found out that she hadn't been to work at all. She froze again, for longer this time. I'm sure she hadn't been expecting me to go to such lengths. She probably didn't even think I had her number. That's when I was 100% sure she was lying to me. When she spoke again, She was just as casual as before and said that she'd taken the day off. I asked her why she didn't tell me, and she asked when I became her prison warden. That reply ticked me off, but I knew that was her goal. She wanted me to get mad so she could derail the conversation, or turn me into the villain. I took a deep breath and stayed on course. I told her that I wasn't being controlling, but she'd lied to me about where she was and ignored my texts and calls for hours. If she really just needed some time alone, she could have gotten that without being dishonest. She scoffed and said she didn't owe me an explanation of her day just because we were married. Then she said that this was the type of thing she was trying to escape from. She was tired of being questioned every time she went in and out of the house. I recognized that as deflection, and it might have worked with someone more hot-tempered, but not me. I didn't track all her movements. I actually trusted her to keep me up to date on where she was going and how long she'd be there. I did the same with her. I wasn't going to let her spin this to make me the one in the wrong, so I pushed further. I asked her to tell me exactly who she was with and where they went. She sighed like I was bothering her, and she said she'd already told me. She'd met up with her friends, and they spent the day hitting the town. I asked her if they would tell me the same thing if I called them. She insisted they would, and even named them. It sounded plausible, if not for the fact that she'd fallen off the radar for an entire day. If she were really just out with her friends, then she wouldn't have had an issue with replying to my messages or answering my calls. I nodded and said I didn't need to call them. I pretended that I was satisfied with her answer. She seemed cautious at first, but when I calmed down, she started to relax. I chewed her out for dodging my calls for a bit longer, but as I understood her desire for some alone time, she apologized and said it wouldn't happen again, and she went to bed. Of course, I was lying. I knew her friends would lie to cover for her, and I was certain that she'd spent that time with another man, because that was the only thing that really made any sense, but there was no way I could get her to admit it willingly. I could push all I wanted, but we'd just argue ourselves in circles. So I took a different approach. I waited until she fell asleep, and I logged into her phone. I went into her messages with the friends she named, and I wasn't surprised at all by what I found. She gave them a cover story to tell me in case I called them. They all agreed to lie to me. One of them replied with a thumbs up, and then asked, "Mike?" Jenna said yes, and then explained that she'd fallen asleep at his place, and I'd called her 1,000,000 times. She said she knew I'd be mad when she got home, and she was scared to face me. She was right about that. I was furious. But I wasn't done. My next move was to go through her messages with Mike, but it seemed like they'd been deleted. The best I could do was find the time she'd called him in her call logs. They spoke often, usually when she was at work or on her way home. She'd called him that same day, in the morning after she left home. She probably went straight to his place after she left for work. From the moment Lily told me that she hadn't come into work, the possibility of her cheating had been slipping in and out of my mind, but I tried to ignore it. When Jenna had come waltzing in like everything was fine, then I knew she was being unfaithful. But it still hurt to see the evidence right in front of my face. I wanted to wake her up and throw it in her face. She'd lied so confidently to me just a few hours before. She'd even pulled her friends in on the lie. She'd planned every step of her deception and gone out of her way to make me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. But confronting her right there felt wrong. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be shut out completely before I left her. The next morning, I acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. She was quieter than normal, and I could tell that she was watching me carefully. She was probably trying to see if I really bought her story from the night before. I acted like I did. We had breakfast, joked, and I even gave her a kiss on the cheek before I headed out the door. And then I disappeared too. I had already packed everything I needed in my car the night before. I didn't go to a work or a friend's house. The first place I went was to meet up with a lawyer. I explained what happened the night before and showed him the messages with her friends that I'd taken from her phone. I let him know that I wanted a divorce, and we discussed my options. When I left his office, I didn't head home. I wasn't ready to head back home at all. As she thought it was all right to disappear without a word, then she'd find out just what it felt like before I split up from her for good. It's been 2 days since I left home now. She texted me the first day, and she quickly got worried when I didn't respond on time. The messages started getting more and more distressed, but I only replied once she said she was thinking about calling the police. I wanted to get back at her, but I didn't want things to get more complicated than they needed to be. But I still wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily, so all I said was, "I'm fine, taking a break." Watching her blow up at that was the happiest I've been since this whole thing came to light. She called me 3 times as soon as she read the message, but I just let it ring. She followed it up with a barrage of texts asking me what I meant by taking a break. She pleaded with me to talk with her, and eventually said, "Is this about the other night?" That was a really stupid question, as far as I'm concerned, because she should know for a fact that that was the basis behind it. I was tempted to say something, just to gloat and piss her off more, but I kept my silence, and she kept texting. "You're overreacting. Let's talk about this like adults." I wanted to keep ignoring her, but I couldn't resist the temptation at that point. I texted, "Do you want to talk about Mike?" Then I stopped replying and watched as she started arguing with herself. She sent around 20 messages after that, so I won't post them all, but she started off with denial and anger. After a few hours, she was apologetic. She didn't admit anything outright, but it was obvious that she knew she'd messed up. She's texted me again today, and her tone has completely changed. Suddenly, she's understanding and patient. I think she realizes just how much trouble she's in. Here are some of the gems she sent today. "I'm here when you're ready to come back. We can fix this, you know. And you know I love you, right?" I almost laughed out loud. She was sleeping with another man and getting her friends to cover up for her, and she still had the nerve to act like she was being gracious. This is someone who meticulously planned things around their affair. It wasn't the kind of thing that just happened because she was drunk around the wrong person. I'm going to keep ignoring her, and I don't plan on going home anytime soon, at least not until the divorce is in progress. Update. Before I get into the update, I just wanted to thank everyone for the support on my previous post. One of the most common comments I got was that I made a mistake in leaving the house for her. I used the word house, but it's an apartment really. We were renting, and I didn't want to live there after the divorce. I didn't waste any time finding a new place to rent. I kept up my silence with Jenna until she'd been served with the divorce papers. I gave my lawyer her work address, and he handled the entire process. I knew when she found out because she called me 3 times in a row, and I answered on the third one. All of her hope and optimism from the previous messages was completely gone. She sounded like she was completely melting down out of panic. For the first minute or two, I could barely make out what she was saying. When she started becoming coherent again, I could pick up that she was demanding that I come back home and talk to her. I waited quietly while she ranted. Once she caught her breath, I just told her there was nothing to talk about. She didn't agree and said I was throwing away our marriage over something I knew nothing about. I asked if she was referring to her affair with Mike. She claimed that nothing had happened between them. According to her, she'd gotten drunk and slept it off at his house. I didn't buy it for a second. Did she think I was an idiot? Even if that was true, what was she doing at another man's house? Why did she think it was a good idea to be at another man's house in such an impaired state? Either way, she couldn't dodge the situation. I said she could cut the crap. Her story was full of holes from the start. She'd skipped work and lied about it, and then she asked her friends to cover for her, and now she was telling me she was just sleeping off being drunk? I told her I'd seen her messages with her friends. When she came home, she showed no signs of being intoxicated. I wasn't going to come home to talk with her because I was tired of having her lie to my face. That's when the tears began. She said she was sorry and she hadn't meant for anything to happen. She swore that it was only the one time. I didn't believe that. She planned a whole day away with this guy on her first time? It sounded unlikely. It didn't matter anyway. One time was the same as 100 as far as I was concerned. She said it was a mistake and that my disappearance had taught her a lesson. She said she was ready to fight to save our marriage. I just replied that it was too late. She destroyed it the moment she decided to sleep with Mike. I was making things official with the divorce. Then I ended the call. She called me a few more times after that, but I just put my phone on Do Not Disturb. She started texting too, but I ignored those as well. I didn't even read them right away. When I finally checked them out, the messages were all over the place. She went back and forth between apologizing, blaming me, and trying to negotiate. She even tried to guilt me by telling me her parents were devastated that I had left her. I didn't respond to that directly. I just texted her parents and showed them the screenshots of their daughter conspiring with her friends to cover up her affair. Her parents weren't happy to see that. Her dad took his daughter's side, saying that people used to talk through their marital problems back in the day and that I was an example of everything that was wrong with modern men. I ignored him. I knew he was just hurt to see what his precious daughter was really capable of. Her mom was slightly different. She acknowledged that her daughter had messed up, but she still wanted me to give her a chance. I explained to her that I had no tolerance for cheating. If she did it once, then she would definitely do it again. I wasn't planning on sticking around for a repeat performance. Fortunately for me, I made a clean break. The divorce went through pretty favorably for me. Our assets were divided pretty cleanly since we hadn't acquired much in our short marriage. For the same reason, she didn't get any alimony. My lawyer had told me right from the beginning that alimony was unlikely since it was a short marriage, but you could never tell how these things would go. I considered myself lucky. She got the apartment, but like I said, I basically gave that to her. I only ever saw her again during the divorce, and I never spoke to her directly if I could help it. After our last phone call, I decided that I was done with her completely. That even meant me being done talking to her ever again. I blocked her on everything, and she had to communicate with me through my lawyer. She never showed up at my door because she didn't know who I moved in with when I left, and I never disclosed my new address. I stopped talking to her family and mutual friends because I didn't want her to find out where I lived. I took it very seriously, and it's paid off. Now I'm living my life in peace. No cheating wife, no sudden disappearances, and no gaslighting. I hated to see my marriage dissolve over something that seemed to come out of nowhere, but I had to protect myself. She disappeared to have some fun, but I disappeared to get her out of my life. Turns out she was right. It was nice to have a break, especially from a cheating wife. That's not someone who made a bad call in the heat of the moment. That's someone who planned it out. She had backup stories ready. She coached her friends. She deleted messages. That takes intention and a whole lot of disrespect. And then to hit you with that, "Since when do I have to report to you?" What? And then the fact that she was just starting to believe she got away with it, thinking she'd smoothed it over with that half-baked story. And then boom, served at work? Brutal. Beautiful. Deserved. What would you do? And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.